Endless online searches, trekking from dealer to dealer. But here it is, the Volvo XC90, a luxury SUV that emphasises convenience and comfort, a panoramic roof, advanced air purifier, a head-up display that changes to suit light conditions, an air suspension system that ensures a smooth ride by constantly adjusting the ride height and shock absorbers. Now at special run-out pricing from $99,990 plus on-roads. Visit Volvo Cars and discover why the Volvo XC90 is the vehicle for right now.
You're listening to the Weekend Sport Podcast with Jason Pine from News Talk ZB.
On News Talk ZB, you'll remember this from Shane van Gisbergen.
Shane van Gisbergen has been perfect. He has navigated the streets of Chicago to perfection. The final time, onto the front stretch. He comes to the checkered flag. He's won the very first street race in NASCAR.
Yes, indeed, Shane van Gisbergen there with that win in Chicago in NASCAR after that switch a couple of years ago. He's had a season in Xfinity, and tomorrow morning in the showpiece of NASCAR, the Daytona 500, one of the biggest events in world motorsport, Shane van Gisbergen will be there and on the start line. Joining us stateside to discuss is NBC Motorsport journalist Nate Ryan. Nate, thanks for joining us on News Talk ZB this afternoon.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, SVG, Shane van Gisbergen, as we know him down here in New Zealand, to have his debut at the Daytona 500 in really a matter of hours. Look, I guess the countdown's on for Shane van Gisbergen. From a local's perspective, what are you expecting from Shane van Gisbergen, and how different will this be for him as he gets underway in the early hours of Monday morning our time?
It's going to be extremely different from what he's used to in the Supercar Series and what you guys have seen down under in New Zealand and Australia. I mean, he's going to be on this oval, and it's not anything like he's ever experienced. It seems rather simplistic because it's essentially just making 4 turns a lap. And, you know, it's not like road courses or street courses where there's elevation changes and shifting and turns. This is, it seems simple, like I said, but it's a very dynamic process, and I think that's what SVG has struggled with so far, is that he's trying to learn exactly where to put his car on the track on every lap. And again, it seems reductive. It seems like it should just be as simple as just turning left, but there's actually a lot more to it. There's a lot of nuances to it, and I think that's what he'll be figuring out in the Daytona 500, the biggest race of the year. Has
Xfinity, a year in that last year, equipped him at all for what to expect tomorrow?
It certainly helped. You know, he didn't have any oval experience before he got to NASCAR. He made his first oval start less than 2 years ago in the Truck Series. And like you said, then he had a year in Xfinity. He also did some Cup races as well. So he doesn't come into this cold. But the thing that's different about the Daytona 500 is this is the Cup Series, and these are the very best drivers in America in NASCAR. And they have just oodles of experience compared to SVG on how to race these ovals, like I was talking about. And it's not just about the fact that this is an oval. It's a very particular specialized type of racing. It's super speedway racing. The horsepower is choked down on all of these cars, so they run in really tight packs. And it's very, very easy to make a mistake that can take you from the lead to 20th in a half a lap. And it's also very easy to make a mistake to make a bobble that can trigger a huge multi-car wreck. And unfortunately, SVG's already been in a wreck this week during the qualifying race Thursday. So hopefully that doesn't happen Sunday, but it's very difficult to avoid. We're sure to see big crashes at the Daytona 500. Usually, 41 car field. I would not surprise me at all if only 15, 20 cars finish. And hopefully Shane van Gisbergen is one of them.
I saw a quote from him saying he had to be prepared to wreck his car, and it was quite the mindset shift from what he's been used to in supercars. How tricky is that for him?
Jeff Burton, who's a NASCAR and NBC analyst and raced in NASCAR for 20 plus years, won all the big races. He said about racing at Daytona is that what's really hard about it is you don't go into many races expecting to wreck. And like I said, more than half the field probably is going to wreck in the Daytona 500. So it's really difficult, I think, for drivers to adjust to that mindset and to just understand that there's a better than 50-50 chance your car is going to end up in the wall here. And you can't really hold back because of that. I think you have to kind of rewire your brain a little bit and be cautious when you're in the draft and you're in the middle of all these cars that are inches apart at 200 miles an hour, but you also have to take risks. And it's a really fine balance. And that's why it's so difficult for someone who's as inexperienced as SVG on the ovals. So I get what he's saying when he says that. You really have to be ready to kind of totally twist your mindset around from being a 3-time Supercars champion.
So what does a good result for him look like tomorrow? Is it as simple as you said, finishing the race?
I think top 10 would be an excellent result for him. Finishing, I think, like you said, would be great. But if he's still on the track with like 15 to 20 laps to go, he's probably going to have a chance to finish in the top 15, presuming he's still in the lead lap. Because, again, this is a real strange type of racing where, we've seen fluky winners at the Daytona 500, where it doesn't always favor the most experienced drivers, even though it's really hard, I think, as a rookie to come in here and just win. But if you manage to sort of, it's like a game of Survivor. If you manage to like just stay out there and avoid the big crashes, and you're in the mix with like 20 to go, and at that point SVG will have more than 400 miles of experience on the high banks of Daytona International Speedway. It's not out of the realm of possibility that he could finish top 10 or even top 5.
Another driver debuting tomorrow who we're familiar with down here from years of watching IndyCar with Scott Dixon, Scott McLaughlin, Helio Castroneves to make his debut as well, which is pretty special. He's won the Indy 500, of course, 4 times. So to have a racer of his caliber crossing over, what's the reception like for Helio Castroneves making his Daytona 500 debut?
I think the reception has been great, and NASCAR actually created a special exemption for Elliott Castroneves so he could make this race. He didn't make the race actually on speed or through the race. He had to use this special provisional that NASCAR created for, in this case, a 4-time Indy 500 winner. It's for any world-class driver, and Elliott Castroneves certainly is that. But unfortunately, Elliott's had a really tough week. I mean, this is his NASCAR debut. He's never raced in stock cars at this level, at this speedway. And he's raced a couple of support races. He's raced in the qualifying race, and he's crashed in all of them. And he had a really bad rookie mistake in the qualifying race Thursday. But all of that being said, he did manage to finish 5th, despite being in one of the early crashes in the support race the day before the Daytona 500. So again, I think he's got a shot if he's there at the end. But regardless, to your point, the fact that he's even in this race certainly raises the profile for NASCAR, just like SVG being in the race. I mean, having 2 world-class drivers like SVG and Elliott Castroneves in the biggest race of the NASCAR season, it's a big win for NASCAR.
Some of our listeners will know the name Daytona 500, may not be as familiar with it, but I was watching the Fox Sports coverage of the Super Bowl last week. They were advertising it heavily. It's really is one of the jewels in the crown of American motorsport, world motorsport, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, this is the race every NASCAR driver wants to win. It's just like the Indianapolis 500, which, as you probably know, Scott McLaughlin was on the pole for that race last year. And I mean, just winning the pole for that race attracted a ton of attention. But when you win the Indy 500, when you win the Daytona 500, that's essentially how you're introduced for the rest of your career as an American race car driver. You're Daytona 500 winner, Austin Cindric. No matter what Austin Cindric does for the rest of his career, he's going to be first introduced as a Daytona 500 winner. So, this is the big one. This is the crown jewel of the NASCAR season. It kicks off their year, which is a little bit weird to have the quasi Super Bowl be the season opener, but that's the way NASCAR does it. So it'll be a ton of eyeballs at Daytona National Speedway watching what happens on the Daytona 500.
And just finally, Nate, so grateful for your time. Just going back to Shane van Gisbergen, in terms of the year ahead, a big year again, obviously, for him. What will success look like for Shane van Gisbergen this year?
Well, it's really going to be an interesting year for SVG because, like I mentioned, he's really, I think, going to struggle to get acclimated on the ovals. I think winning on the ovals is going to be extremely difficult. But NASCAR has this unique playoff system where if you win a race, you qualify for their 10-race dash to the championship, which are called the playoffs at the end of the season. And there are 6 or 7 street race and road course races on the Cup Series season. And in every one of those races, SVG is going to be a favorite to win, especially at Chicago, where, as you know, he won in his first time ever in NASCAR in 2023. He probably would have won the race last year if he wouldn't have been wrecked. So SVG has a really good chance as a rookie of running for a championship in NASCAR's Premier Series, because he's probably going to qualify the playoffs by getting a win either at Chicago or one of those road courses. So it's going to be a learning year for SVG, but it could be a very successful year for him as well.
Well, plenty of fun awaits for the year ahead, but Daytona 500 tomorrow. Enjoy the racing. Nate Ryan, thanks so much for your time here on News Talk ZB.
Thanks so much for having me.
That is Nate Ryan, NBC motorsport journalist, joining the program. Yes, the Daytona 500 early tomorrow morning. I think I saw about 7:30 a.m., if memory serves, for it. I think they brought forward half an hour. We'll double-check that and come back with an official time for you after the break here on News Talk ZB. I did say they make a change because there's storms on the way or something like that. So 7:30, we've got the nod of approval from producer Andy. So 7:30 tomorrow morning, Shane van Gisbergen in one of motorsport's biggest events, the Daytona 500. Very cool to see a Kiwi on the start line for that event.
For more from Weekend Sport with Jason Pine, listen live to News Talk ZB weekends from midday or follow the podcast on iHeartRadio.
For a few years in the 1970s, the Mr. Asia Syndicate made millions.
Heroin creates its own market. It acts like a form of plague.
Until jealousy, betrayal, and murder brought it all crashing down.
Then he just pulled out a gun, shot her in the back of the head, and then said to Wayne, "You're going to help me bury her."
This is Mr. Asia, a forgotten history. Listen to episodes from February 19 on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts.